No problem. I don't know what he did. He didn't make you an admin, and he didn't make you.
Okay, very good.
All right, you guys, I'm gonna go. But see you later.
Tell me if it.
They muted me. Hi.
Okay, tell me. I think I'm good.
Okay, so
Yeah,
the
let me-
link, let me just check. You started streaming
32 seconds ago.
2 seconds ago. You started streaming.
32 seconds ago.
Okay, well. Let me just test it.
There you go.
For the prepare, so
All right.
as long as they're able to.
Participate. Okay. All right. Everybody over there in TV land. Best mute. Khan? Okay, everybody. We're just going to start chapter 2 of Ruth. Yeah, there's the papers. I made copies for everybody. So, as a courtesy, I'll just review what happened in last week's in last Perek College chapter. If you remember, Naomi, Elimelech, her husband, that is, and her 2 sons, moved from Eretz Yisrael to Moav, and not for the right reasons. They wanted to run away from, best of case, they wanted to run away from all the bad things that were going on there, and they didn't want to make a difference to make it better. Worst case scenario is they just ran away because they were the only rich people in town, and everybody was bothering them, and they just didn't want to be there. They were stingy, frankly, and that's why they left. And they moved to Moav, and they learned the ways of Moav, and back then people died quickly from their sins. It was very obvious. So Elimelech, the wife of Elimelech, died quickly, and the 2 sons died, and Naomi was left alone with her 2 new daughters-in-law that were the princesses of Moav. The 2 princesses of Moav, one whose name was Orpah, one whose name was Ruth. And then after 10 years, Naomi decided it's time to go home. She went back to Eretz Yisrael. And the 2 daughters-in-law were debating whether or not they should go too. One decided to stay, and the other decided to go with her. And they went this perilous journey through the wilderness from Moav to Eretz Yisrael, and they arrived in Eretz Yisrael destitute and ostracized. And there they were, the 2 women, one Ger Tzedek, Gieris, I should say, and the other was her mother-in-law, Naomi. Now, before I start, I want to give a little introduction to chapter 2. There are a few terms that we're going to be using that you need to be familiar with. One is the word leket and shikha. There's agriculture, halacha in agriculture, that people that own property, they need to, among other things, there's a payal as well, they need to leave behind for the poor. There's details to it. One, The way it works is the farmer harvests the wheat, and whatever he drops as he's walking along with the wheat must stay. There's details in that, but that's what basically it. And the other is is when they go when they that's what they dropped. And the other is when they go past with the field and whatever was forgotten. Also, there's details into halacha that too stays for the poor. And there's other ways. It's interesting that this is the poor were able to sustain themselves back. That's the one concept you need to remember of the leket and the shikha, how the poor sustain themselves in Eretz Yisrael, because the people and the farmers were obligated to keep that mitzvah. The other thing you need to remember is something called a goyel. A goyel is a practice of when somebody owns land. When God divided Eretz Yisrael, when Yeshua divided Eretz Yisrael among different among the tribes, and then subdivided them among the families. He wanted the land should stay in the family. And if for some reason somebody had to sell, it was preferred that it stay within the family. And that was called a goyel, who had the right of first refusal to buy the land from somebody who had to sell. And that was a family member. So those are two things that we're gonna remember. And another thing to say about the leket and shikha, it's a very nice thing. It's a nice mitzvah of giving to the poor, but it was fraught with opportunity for fraud and nepotism and abuse. You have poor people walking around a rich person's farm, and he's picking up things. It wasn't as rosy as it sounded. And here we go. Ula Naomi and Naomi Moida had an acquaintance, Pasuk Aleph, Isha, to her husband, Ish Giber Chayil, a man of great valor, Mishpachas Elimelech, of the family of Elimelech, and Shmei Boaz, and his name was Boaz. Rashi, Karev, Moida is a Karev, is a relative. The way he translates it here is kinman, a kinship. Kinship is a relative and a friend and a family. Okay, now and Rashi goes through a little of a family tree here. Ben Achiv shel Elimelech haya, and he was the nephew of Elimelech, this Boaz. And Amr Rabbi Seinu Zal, our sages taught us, Elimelech, the Salmin Avi Boaz. We're going to count four people here. Elimelech, Salmon, the father of Boaz, Pliny Almoini, somebody who he was not really named Pliny Almoini. I think his name was, Pliny Almoini means like John Doe. We don't know his name. He did not merit to have his name mentioned in the Bible, because we'll get to that in chapter 4. But Mr. John Doe, who was the Goyel, the Avi Naomi, and the father of Naomi, who also we don't know his name, Kulam b'nei Nachshon ben Aminadab. All these four men, these four gentlemen, were brothers, children of Nachshon ben Aminadab. We all remember Nachshon ben Aminadab. He was the one that went first into the Yam Suf, and of men of great distinction and great yiches, but their yiches was worth nothing for them. It's because they abandoned Eretz Yisrael in its time of need. So they can have all the lineage, but the fact when the tough gets when the tough gets going, so they were not worthy of having a grandson, David HaMelech, which is ultimately what we get to here. Spoiler alert: Boaz marries Ruth. Okay, we're gonna find that out soon enough. You might as well know now. But the whole relationship thing and how it went down is this is the story that we're going to be learning about. Another thing you need to remember here is it's a very awkward situation. You have a rich uncle, right, whose name is actually a rich nephew. You have a rich relative, Boaz, and you have a poor Naomi with Rus. Why doesn't he just, cut her a check or take care of her? So the Mefarshim talk about this little dance that went on here. On the one hand, she was too proud and didn't want to ask. On the other hand, he didn't want to insult her by offering a handout, where she was such a proud woman from such a fine family. So they both didn't communicate. At the same time, there's other reasons. Boaz, if you remember the last verse of the previous chapter, when Rus and Naomi arrived in Eretz Yisrael, it was the middle of a huge funeral. Whose funeral was it? It was Boaz's wife's funeral. So Boaz was in the middle of Shiva. When they arrived, Boaz was now a freshly minted almond with no children. It's a story in itself. All his children died. And there he was, all alone, just grieving his wife. And also, he was a very busy man because he was the head of the Sanhedrin. So there's so many reasons as to why Boaz didn't do, apparently, on the surface, seemed to be very helpful to his family, Naomi. But maybe he was doing her a favor and just providing her with dignity and giving her an opportunity. It's a conversation that we can have for a long time, but that's just something I wanted to give you a little context. So, Pasuk Beis, V'teimer Rus hamayavia el Naomi, and Rus the Moabite said to Naomi, Eilcho no hasoda ve'alakoto v'shvolim achar asher emtzochein be'enov v'teimer lo l'chi viti. Rashi, El Chana Asada, Le'echad Misdeis Anshe Ha'ir, to one of the fields of the people of the city, because the fields were outside of the city. Acharei Echad Mehem Asher Emtzochem Be'enov Shelo Yigarbi, somebody that I will approve of, that will not harass me, that will not bother me. V'ala Kota B'Shvolim Achar Asher Emtzochem Be'enov. Achar mi, who has to, Rashi is saying, like, who has to like who? Achar mi, asher emtzochem be'enav, somebody that I will like. We say that beggars can't be choosy, but this was a very choosy beggar, because she was thinking she's not going to go to just anybody to be begging, but rather she would hope to, to find somebody that will, again, the people were discriminating, people were racist. She came from another country. She may have looked different. Maybe she had slanted. I don't know what she looked. She may have been looked from another country, and she looked different. And people, we know that today. People don't understand people from other cultures, and they look different than us. We discriminate against them, as well as the fact that they didn't like Moabites. Whatever it was, she was very careful where she would go and collect this tzedakah from. Pasuk Gimel, Vatelech vatovei vatelaked bizdei achrei hakeitzrim. And she went and she came. We'll get to that in a second. Rashi will explain. Acharei hakeitzrim, following the people that are harvesting, they walked with a sickle. Vayiker, and she was collecting whatever fell to the ground, so she can gather for food. But here's a very, very consequential word. Vayiker mikreha, and her coincidence happened. This is where everything changed. Something happened for her, and she chanced upon Chelkas Hasada LeBoaz. She came to the fields of Boaz, Asher Mimishpachas Elimelech, that was of the family of Elimelech. Now, this telach, this mikra. Well, let's do the Rashi, and then we'll get back to that. But tovei vatilakit basada, she went and tovei vatilakit basada. She went and she gathered in the field. Matzina b'medrash Rus, we see ad loy ozlas achas shu emer v'tovei v'achar vatilakit. So what is it that in a question mark? Doesn't it mean, what does it mean? Before she even left, she came. What the Rashi's question is? Taylor Vatove, she left, she went, and she came. So Ella Shehoisam. So Rashi gives a very simple answer. He says, "What you know? Why she came and went? What that was all about." She made simonim for herself. She made she left little post-its on the road. Don't forget, she's an immigrant. She's in a town that she's never in a country that she's never been to before, and she's going out in the fields to gather tzedakah. She doesn't know her way around, and so what she did was she left little markings for herself so that when she shouldn't get lost, and when it's time to come home, she'll know how to come home. קודם שנכנס לסודה, והולכו בו וחוזר לעיר, כדי לעשות סימונים וציונים שלא תיטה בשבילן ותדע לשוב, and she should know how to return. That was what Rashi says, that simply Vatela Fatovi means that she made for herself signs not to get lost. I learned two other explanations for it. The Gemara says Vatela Fatovi, she was simply wandering, looking for an appropriate field to go to, and the Gross says a very interesting pshat. What does Vatela Vatovi means? And Boaz noticed her wisdom. She was very wise. She don't forget what she was doing. She was going to the fields, gathering wheat, and then coming home. So imagine you go from here and you're going, 3 blocks to carry a load along the way. The smartest thing to do is to go the 3 blocks and pick up your load on the way back, instead of carrying it on the way there, and then you have to carry it on the way back. If you're going 3 blocks, you're actually carrying your heavy load 6 blocks. And so you're going it all the way to the end of your journey, and then you're still carrying it for the way back of your journey. But she was Vatela Fatave, what it means was she went to the end of where she was going, and she started working her way backwards so her load should be less heavy. And that's what one of the things that Boaz would later notice, some very, very beautiful and wise things about her. That was one of the things that he admired, her wisdom. And here, Vayiker Mikreha, and something Mikreha, and here she was her chance. She chanced upon Lovay Bechel Kasasada Asher Boaz. Of all the fields in Israel, of all the fields in Beis Lechem, the field that she chanced upon was the field of Boaz. The Medrash says that Sholcha Malach Lefanel Veitzlicha Darka, that there was an angel with her and gave her success in this serendipity. That's why we call this class serendipity. Pasuk Daled, V'hinei Boaz bo mi Beis Lechem, and Boaz is now coming from Beis Lechem. Vayemer lakeitzrim Hashem imochem. Vayemer loy yivarechecha Hashem. And Boaz said, it came from Beis Lechem, and he said to the reapers, may Hashem be with you. And they answered him, the Lord bless you. What happened here? There was Rashi says, not Rashi doesn't say anything. The Mefarshim say that this was Shaloi Kedarke. He wasn't supposed to be there that day. Boaz was not supposed to be there that day. Why? Where was he? And why was he there? So, like I said before, Boaz was a very, very important person, and he was the head of the Sanhedrin. In fact, on that day, there were 2 very important cases that were brought before the Sanhedrin. Imagine today the Supreme Court. You have cases, controversial, big cases that are big consequences. That Roe v. Wade, prayer in school, gun control, all of these things that we have in court. Back on that day that Boaz was a Sanhedrin, there were two big issues before the Sanhedrin, and he had to deal with them. And but the first pasuk that it says Giber Chayil, when it says Giber Chayil, the Targum translates Tokiv Be'iraisa. He was a very strong in Torah because he was a big Talmud Chacham. But so there he was, the head of Sanhedrin. What were the cases that he had to deal with? One was the case that we know that we're going to be talking about, whether or not the prohibition of a Moav, whether the prohibition of a Moabite woman is included in the prohibition of a Moabite man becoming Jewish. In other words, when it says whether a Moabite woman may be accepted to Kal Yisrael, that was the issue on the table. Little did he know, or maybe he did, that was an issue that was very close to home for him, because he was going to marry this Moabite woman. But that was the issue number one, and it was a big debate in the Sanhedrin happening on that day. The other issue was an amendment, what did they say? A case was brought to court, to the Senate, to the Sanhedrin, whether there was, you're not allowed to mention Hashem's name in vain, right? So, but people felt, there were Chachamim at that time that said that God's name is nowhere. We're not allowed to mention God's name in vain, and God's name is nowhere. We should start saying Baruch Hashem. We should start saying, when we greet somebody, mention God. And it was like, no, you can't just say God's name for nothing. And should we say God's name in vain, or do we say? No. So the Rabbanim said, well, if we would mention God a little more often, maybe the world would be a better place. So those were the two issues that the Sanhedrin were dealing with on that day. And Boaz got straight down to business. And he's sitting there, and this is a miracle that happened. Shaloi Kedarke, when he showed up to meet when he came to his field, what happened? V'hinei Boaz ba mibeis lechem pasuk daled. He had a tremendous feeling in his head. I need to go to check on my field out in the farm. I need to go out there. Now, don't forget, you got to get into the car, and you got to go out to driving up to the Catskills to see how your farm is doing. When he's busy in Washington, to see, or he's to Kansas to check on his farm. He had this tremendous urge. He took the gavel, gave it a patch on the table. He says, "Excuse me, gentlemen, I'm going to check on my property out of town, and I'll be back." And that's why he shows up in Pasuk Dalet. It says, "V'hinei Boaz ba." Boaz showed up. And of course he had a good foreman, and the foreman was there running the business and checking on the fields and so on. Pasuk Hey, Vayomer Boaz lenare hanitzav ala keitzrim lemi hanara hazes. Suddenly he sees his foreman. He sees a servant, and who's standing there over the reapers, and he says to him, "Who is this girl? Lemi hanara hazes. To whom is this maiden?" Rus was 40 years old here. Boaz is thinking shidduch. Just saying. Lemi hanara hazes. So Rashi says, "V'chidarke shel Boaz lishel b'noshim." Is it appropriate? Is it a habit of Boaz to ask about the women? Elo divrei tznius v'chochma roba. But rather he saw modesty and wisdom in this woman. Shtei shibolim likta, shleisha eina likta. She saw when there were two stalks of wheat. When we said earlier, like the guy picks up the bulldozer is moving along the farm and picking up wheat and drops some. What's considered dropped leftover for the poor person, and what's considered something that still the owner is going to come. It doesn't count as leket. So she was very particular, and she said, "Well, if it's two stalks, that I can pick up. If it's three, I'm not going to pick it up." Very, very particular. And also another thing about her, in her manner, not only what she picked up, but the manner. The stalks that were upright, she picked them up while she was standing, and the ones that were on the floor, she bent in its knees to away to pick them up. And Boaz noticed this. And now there's a great debate among Mefarshim, literally split down the middle, whether the foreman meant well or not meant well. Vayan hanar hanitzav alaketzim. And so this pasuk, is it meant as a compliment or not? And the nar hanitzav alaketzim, and the servant in charge of the reaper answered and said, "He mo'ova he hashava im Naomi misdeim oyav." She is a Moabite woman who returned with Naomi from the fields of Moab. Rashi, hashava im Naomi. Rashi says that the word hashava, we had that in the previous chapter as well, can be sometimes will return or has returned. So Rashi just explains to us that hatam l'mayla mitachas hashin l'fishul shein ovar ve'ein loshen pe'elis. It's not a present. It's not a verb, but rather it's something that happened before. And the foreman is still talking here, and he says that she said. He said that she said, "Alakota na v'asafti v'amorim," and she said, "I will now glean and gather from among the sheaves after the reapers." V'tovei v'tamid mioz habeker ve'ad ata ze shifta habayis me'ot. And she came and stood from the morning until now, except when she sat now for a little while in the hut. So Boaz asked the foreman who this woman is. This woman is a woman that's been here. She's a Moabite woman. She's been here all day. And she's, again, we don't know if it's in a positive tense or a negative sense. The one that says in a positive sense, he was makabel. The one that says in a negative sense, we learn later that the Medrash says that Boaz had a conversation with Ruth and clarified, because he didn't trust the Lashon Hara. But we'll get to that in a minute. But Tamer, how does the foreman know what Ruth is thinking is said? So he says she said to herself, "Tamer belibo alaktono leket hashibolim." This is the leket. V'asafti v'amorim shikho shel amorim. These are the forgotten sheaves. That is what who Ruth is, and that is what she's doing. So the one that says it in a negative sense, what he's saying is that, she's sitting here really in the hut. She's waiting for a moment where no one's paying attention. She's going to go steal something. That's what the negative way of the. Oh my God, the foreman. Not in his defense, the foreman that we're talking about. Did he mean well or did he not mean well? Even when he was speaking negatively about Ruth, according to the interpretation that he was speaking negatively about Ruth, he felt that Boaz was such an important person, he shouldn't be even considering a woman like this for a wife, because he can do better, I guess. But Tamar, Pasuk Ches. Pasuk Ches, Vayemer Boaz el Rus, Halei Shamad Biti. Again, the word Biti. Rus, Naomi also in Pasuk Aleph, Pasuk Beis also called her Biti, my daughter. Because if you were my daughter, let me backtrack here. Pasuk Beis, it says, Rus asked Naomi if she should go to the fields, and Naomi said, yes, go, my daughter. Because even if you're my daughter, I'm not sending you to do something that I wouldn't do myself. My own daughter, I'm treating you like my own daughter. Go to the fields and get the food. He was thinking about her in the best possible way. So here too, Vayemer Boaz el Rus, Halei Shamad Biti. Halei Shamat means here It doesn't mean, he means it in a nice way. Listen to me, sweetheart, my dear daughter. Al telchi livkot besoda acher, v'gam lo savuri mize v'choy sidbokin im nareso. Don't, dear daughter, listen to me. Do not go and glean in another field. Neither shall you go away from here, and here you shall stay with my maidens, with the girls that are here. Stay here. My field is big enough. There's plenty of work here to do. You don't have to go wander from field to field. This is a very big field that's mine. Stay here. Einayich basoda al yiktzerun v'halach tacharein halitzivisias anorim levilti nogeich v'tzomis v'halach el hakelim v'shosis asher yishavun hanaorim. You keep your eyes shall be on the field that they reap, and you shall follow them. And I told everybody that they should not touch you. And if you are thirsty, you may go to the vessels. He says it to the vessels and drink from that which the youths have drawn. You don't have to go draw water. There's bottled water in the fridge. You can help yourself to it. You don't have to go in and the boys will be the ones that are going to be drawing the water from the well, and they'll prepare it in vessels for you. Help yourself. Rashi, if you're thirsty, if you are thirsty, don't hesitate to go to the water that the boys will be drawing. Help yourself. Pasuk Yud. Vatipel al panel vatishtachu arza. Vatemer elov madua motzasichein be'einecha lahakireni v'anoichi nochriya. And she fell on her face and prostrated herself to the ground. And she said to him, "Why have I pleased you that you should take cognizance of me, seeing that I'm a foreigner?" Now, this was not false humility. She genuinely thought that Boaz had a mistaken identity. You don't know who I am. I'm not good. I'm not a good person. Perhaps you're mistaken that I am, that you're nice to me because you think I'm somebody else. I'm a foreigner, and you're not supposed to be good to me. So, let me show you my ID. Vayan Boaz vayemer la, who God li? It was told to me, Kel asher asis es chamoiseich, acharei moisi sheich, vatazvi avich v'imech, ve'eretz meladetech, vatelchi el am asher lo yodait tmel shisham. I heard, it's been told to me. The Mefarshim say, who God, the double term of I was told. One is I see with my own reason, and second, I've told through nevuah. In other words, begashmis and beruchnis, do I know all that you have done for your mother-in-law after your husband's death, and you left your father's home. Don't forget, she was a princess, right? And the place of your birth, and you went to a foreign land that you never knew. A strange new land. I heard who you are, and I know what you did. Pasuk Yud Beis. By the way, and also the Mefarshim says in Pasuk Yud Aleph, Vayan Boaz, he said it loudly. He didn't whisper it. He said it in a loud voice so that people around him should hear. He wasn't ashamed of what he told her. Pasuk Yud Beis. Yishalem Hashem po'olech usihi maskurteich shlema mim Hashem Elikei Yisrael asher bos lachaseis tachas kenofav. May Hashem reward your deeds, and may your rewards be full from Hashem, from God, under whose wings you have come to take shelter. Tachas kanfei hashchina. You're not here for material benefits. Clearly, you're not here for financial purposes or any material benefits. It is clearly obvious that you have come to be under God's Shechina. You don't even know if you're going to be accepted as Jewish. There's no question of how noble you are. And why does he say Yishalom Hashem Po'olech and Usimas Kutech Shlema Mim Hashem? I can't afford to give you reward for the goodness for what the great deed that you have done to come and be under the sacrifices that you made to be under the Kanfei Ashchina. The reward, only God can pay you back for that. Only God can pay you back for that. My father once told me a funny story. He was in a doctor's. He was in yeshiva and he had to go to the doctor, and he had no money. The yeshiva had no money. They sent him on a bus to go to the doctor, and with an envelope. And my father took a peek at he told me a story. So he peeked at the envelope, and it said Hashem Yishalom Zorach. May the Almighty pay you back for the kindness that you've done. Pasuk Yud Gimel. Vatemer emtzochein beinecha Adoni al nichamti v'chi dibarto alev shifchosecha. And she said, Vatemer emtzochein beinecha Adoni ki nichamti v'chi dibarto alev shifchosecha. You've comforted me. Nichamtoni, you have comforted me. I feel validated. I feel like you're talking to my heart and you're making me feel good. Here, let me translate it. And she said, let me find favor in your sight, my Lord, for you have comforted me and you have spoken to the heart of your handmaid. But I am not as worthy as one of your handmaids, says the princess of Moav. I am not worthy. Can you imagine? Loi eheye kishivchoseich. Eineni chashuva ke'achas min hashvoches shelach. I, the princess of Moav, am not worthy enough to be like one of your servants. And with this, she moved away. She stepped away, took a few steps away from Boaz. She's having this conversation. She said, I'm not worthy, and she stepped back. And Boaz said to her when it was time to eat, come closer, come back closer to me, and eat from my bread. And you should dip your food, your pita, your small piece of bread, in chemetz, in vinegar. And she sat down beside the reapers, and she went over there, and he reached over and handed her vayitzbot lo koli vateichal vatizba vateisar. And he handed her koli. Koli is grain that you roast for a while. It becomes, Mepharshim say, it turns sweet. It's a dessert. It's a delicacy. It's a candy. He gave her some candy. And he's, look at these words. Vateichal, vatizba, vateisar. She ate, she was satisfied, and there was leftover. This term is a term used in royalty. Royalty has that term. This is the first time that we're getting a sense of that there's royalty here. Vateichal, vatizba, vateisar. Because that's what kings do. They have leftovers and they're satisfied more than they exactly. It's just a little hint, but those words are used in other places. Okay, so this is a very, very interesting Rashi. Look, I'm going to read it to you, and you tell me what if you think it's interesting. V'tovalt pitech b'chaimetz, and you will dip your morsel in the vinegar. Says Rashi, Mikan sha'chaimetz yafa l'sharov. From here we know that vinegar is good from a heat wave. How do you know? How does Rashi know that by her dipping her pita in the vinegar, does Rashi know that this is good for a heat wave? It's really interesting. Mefarshim explain it.
Is it?
Yeah. Apparently, and there's some ancient books. I mean, Greek books that talk about health and stuff. Why is Rashi compelled to say this? Don't forget, Rus was a princess. I don't think she was very accustomed to manual labor like the one that she was doing when the story is told. Get her hands dirty, literally in the fields, and it must have been very hard for her. And it was hot because in that time of the year, it was like in this time of the year. So, what are they doing eating vinegar in the field? Why is that a romantic thing to do? Apparently, otherwise he wouldn't have done it. So the fact that Boaz handed her at this time vinegar with her pita is a lesson that it must mean that vinegar and pita is something that's good for a heat wave, like a cold beer. I don't know, something.
Not like a box of chocolates?
No, but something specific, beneficial, not just a treat, a candy. Yeah, a Gatorade, exactly.
Weil sie gewähren mit Wohl
Yeah,
und sie gewähren Lecker und Schickchen und Pehe und sie gewähren verbrennt gemacht.
right.
Ja, sie kennen das verbrennt,
Right. Other, what else? Vayitzbat lo Kelly, Vayesh. So Rashi says, Vayitzbat lo Kali, Vayoshet lo. He reached over and handed her. Ve'ein lo dimim b'mikra ela b'lshen Mishnah, Chirayim v'sovech uveis hatzvita. There's the term tzvita is handing somebody in. It's right. That's why you have in modern Hebrew you have words that that take that word. Okay, moving right along. Pasuk Tezvov, right? Vatokum lelaket. No, is that where I'm up to? Yeah. Okay, Vatokum, and she rose again. Lelaket vayitzav be'ez es ne'orav leimer gam bein ha'amorim telaket v'loisach limuhu. And she rose and continued to do her work. And Boaz ordered her servant, saying, "Let her glean also among the sheaves, and do not embarrass her." In other words, drop some stuff over there for her to make her job easier.
In other words, not only let a chicken pay.
Yeah, but the problem is if it's not leket shikha and peah, then you have an issue. The issue is you have to give meiser for profits. If this was, you don't give meiser, it's like an insurance policy. For some reason, you don't pay tax on an insurance payout. They have some lobbying credit. But if you get a death benefit from an insurance policy, there's no tax in it. And if you collect leket and shikha, you don't pay tax on that. You don't give meiser on leket. But here, if they were dropping, if he was purposely leaving, it's a very halachically not such a simple thing that you can just leave her extra food, because then it would be a shaila and whatever. And I'm not going there, but that's basically what he said was make sure her job is easier and don't be so particular about picking every single piece up so that she should have more things. V'gam sheil tashelu la min hatzvasim va'azaftem v'likta v'loi sigruva, and also pretend to forget some of the bundles for her and leave it that she may glean, and do not scold her. Pasuk Tezayin Rashi, V'gam sheil toshelu, shcheach tishkechu, like a double term. Asu atzmachem kilo atem sheichim. Pretend like you were forgetting. Targum shel shgogo shlusa v'chein al hashal, davar acher loshen ki yishal zeisecha. This term of shal is used for whatever. Rashi is explaining what the word for.
If they seem will fall off, to make it specially fall off.
Right. You shake the tree. Tzvosim,
The Mishnah.
Amorim, Ktanim, Yesh Dugmosi B'Lashon Mishnah, Mitzon, Tzvosim, Oy Chrichais. Okay. The word Tzvosim is used in other context. Pasuk Zayin. Let's move ahead real quick. Vatilakit Basoda al Haaretz al Ad Haarev, and she now had apparently enough strength to go on all day. Vatachbeit, either her heart was light, or physically she felt better. Things were looking up, and she was there all day until the evening. Vatachbeit is kol asher liketo, v'ayihi ke'efos she'edim. Don't forget, after you pick up the wheat from the field, it needs to be hit until the kernels fall out. And she did all of that, and there was an ephah of barley. An ephah is like 20 liters, maybe like 10 gallons. That's what I looked it up today. Ephahs could be up to 10 gallons. Imagine she came home with 10 gallons of wheat, of barley.
But to bring out that not only she took like a tzikropeya, she filled it out much more than that.
Right. Vatis pasuk yudches, vatisa vatovei ha'ir, vaterach hamosei es asher liketo, vateitza vatitin lo es asher isira misava. And here, remember the leftover koli that she had before? So she had it in her pocket, and she gave some to her mother-in-law.
Why didn't she bring all of it?
I don't know. I don't know how she carried it all home. I guess it must have been either she had a wheelbarrow, or because if you remember earlier, Vatela Vatove, he says that she made sure she had markings, and she was light on her feet. That's all of that is part of the same story, perhaps, because if the fact that she was working all day until the night, and she was able to carry 10 gallons of barley. So you know how it is when you have strength. If you're optimistic and you're feeling good about things, maybe that's what she did. Maybe it wasn't all on herself. And she carried it. It says here she carried it herself and came to the city. And her mother-in-law saw that what she had gleaned, and she took it out and gave what she had left over after being satiated. Remember in Pasuk, that earlier Pasuk where she was eating the Vatelach Vatesa. So she gave some to her mother. And her mother-in-law said, Pasuk Yitez, Vatemer Lacha Meisa, Eifa Nikat Hayim, V'ana Asis, where have you gleaned today? And where have you worked? V'ana Asis. And here's an interesting word. Yehi Makirech Baruch. May he who took heed of you be blessed. Makirech, another way of explaining the word makirech, whoever recognized it, the way we use it in English, whoever recognized your value, the person, apparently somebody got it and saw what you see. Don't forget, Naomi had tremendous respect for Ruth. She spent 10 years with her in Moav. She spent that long, perilous journey with her, and she saw who she was dealing with. She saw royalty and a princess and a real special person that chose to make tremendous choices, but nobody else knew. And here, somebody recognized your specialness. Yihi makireich baruch. And she told her mother-in-law, "Is kol asher asayimai, vatemer shem ha'ish asher asisi imai hayom Boaz." And the name of the man that was Boaz. Yihi makirei Baruch, says Rashi, Baruch Bal Asoda Shenosa V'Nosan Loch Ponim Lilkit B'Sodeu, the person who showed you favor and permitted you to glean in his field. Pasuk Chaf, V'temer Naomi lachaleisa Baruch Hu Hashem Asher. Again, she's also saying Baruch Hu Hashem Asher lo yazav chazdei es hachayim es hamesim. V'temer lo Naomi Koriv lanu ha'ish me'ge'aleinu hu. And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "Blessed be the Lord, who did not leave off his kindness with the living or with the deceased." And Naomi said to her, this guy that you're talking about, this Boaz, he is our kinsman, and he is one of our near kinsmen. He's Goyalenu, as we said before, somebody who is somebody that can own our property. So Rashi,
a person that the Rebbe should send.
right. And then he says, Boaz was not in Moav to bury the Naomi's mason. He wasn't even there. Boaz is in Eretz Yisrael. The mason, the three burial plots are in Moav. So how did Boaz help with the mason? But rather, Rashi says it was not the mason that we're thinking of, the three men that died in Moav. Shazanim and Farnes as Achayim the Nitpol B'tzarkei HaMesim. But rather, he sustains and supports the living and occupies himself with the needs of the deceased in general. He's in general with the Chevra Kadisha, I guess, not particular. Rashi wants you to know it's not particularly dealing with Elimelech and his two sons. Pasuk Chafalev, V'temer Ruth Ch Gam ki Omer Elias Hanorim Asher Lib Tidbakin Ad Im Kilu Eis Kol Hakotzir Asher Li. And Ruth also said, and he said to me, stay with my youths until they finish the entire harvest. In other words, the entire season. And don't forget, if you're able to do this the entire season for 6 weeks, this is the harvest season, you're able to bring in a whole harvest, that's the food for the year. You're set. But so things are looking good. The day started off not so good, but the end of the day looked just fine. And Naomi said it's good. It is a good idea. My daughter, again, Biti, my daughter, to do as Boaz says, stick with him, and do not go to another field where they will bother you. Pasuk Chav Gimel, the final pasuk. Vatidbak b'na'aresav Boaz l'laket at klois ktsir hasa'erim ktsir achitim vateshev es chamesa. And she stayed with Boaz's maidens to glean until the completion of the barley harvest and the wheat harvest, and she dwelt with her mother-in-law.
Okay.